Perfect. And we can get going. So hello, everyone. Welcome again. Welcome to the webinar on funding and financing climate neutral cities. Today, we are going to reflect on a very important question, which is how the national level can help cities finance accelerated climate action. My name is Olga Krajewska.
You just muted Olga for some reason.
Thank you so much. I already started introducing myself. Yeah, I've been talking for a minute, but yeah, I'll start again. Thanks. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on funding and financing climate neutral cities. Today, we are going to reflect on a very important question, which is how the national level can help cities finance accelerated climate action. My name is Olga Krajewska, and I'm Policy and Governance Officer at ICLEI Europe. We are a partner in the CapaCITIES and Net Zero Cities project, and very happy to be moderating this session today. And before we kick off with the program, just a few words about the CapaCITIES project. CapaCITIES is a Horizon Europe project under the EU Cities mission. It significantly contributes to the mission through strengthening national support structures for the mission cities in 15 European countries. Essentially, we are working together with national ministries, national agencies, and networks to create enabling conditions for cities to achieve their mission, which is climate neutrality by 2030. The mission itself is an incredible opportunity for different levels of government and different types of stakeholders to join forces, come together, and help cities accelerate their climate action. That's why we are incredibly happy to see so many participants interested in learning more about our work. And this webinar is a part of the capacity building series organized by the CapaCITIES project. We already delivered 2 sessions, the first one on the national level support for the climate city contracts, and the second on national level support for GHG emissions monitoring and reporting at the city level. The recordings from these webinars can be found on the CapaCITIES website that is linked in the chat. And we are also planning to host one more session in spring next year, which will focus on policy alignment across the EU initiatives and programs, as well as partnerships for climate neutral cities. So feel very much invited to also, of course, join the next events that we will be organizing in CapaCITIES. We have many incredible experts here today who agreed to share their knowledge and practical experience from working with cities on the ground. So please join me in welcoming Wolfgang Teubner from ICLEI Europe, who will speak about challenges of cities in financing and accelerated transformation to climate neutrality. Warm welcome also to Fedra Van Heus. I hope I didn't butcher the name too bad, who will shed light on basics of climate investment planning at the city level. Please welcome also Sisi Windisch from the Mission Board, who will talk about private finance and share some insights from the Climate City Contracts Investment Plan process. Then please join me in welcoming Sini Uttu from Business Finland, who will present a very interesting initiative from Finland called Decarbonized Cities. And finally, please welcome Ann-Karin Stoltz from Swedish Energy Agency, who will talk about innovation and public funding in Sweden. As you can see in our program, at the end of our session, we will have time for discussion and Q&A. So all participants are welcome to either submit their questions via chat or raise their hand and ask their questions directly to our speakers. So please be aware that the chat is open for you throughout the entire session. You can post your comments and questions at any time. We'll then collect them and include them in the discussion round at the end. Last but not least, I've already mentioned that some housekeeping rules. Please be aware that this session is recorded. Please keep your microphones on mute to eliminate any background noise. And if possible, we encourage you to turn your cameras on. It's very nice always to see people's faces. And before we kick off with our presentations, we would like to get to know you, the participants, a little bit better. So we've prepared a very short poll on Zoom. So you don't need any additional devices. We will launch 3 simple questions to see who is in the room, what is your profile. So we will now launch the first question. I think you should be able to see it on your screens, and you can select one of the options. On what policy level are you operating? EU, national, regional, local? Yeah, big request to mute yourself when you're joining. Thank you very much. Wonderful. The answers are coming. We have strong representation from the national and local level, but basically all levels are represented today. I think we can move on to the second question. Wonderful. You can hopefully see it on your screens now. What sector or type of institution are you representing? A governmental, non-governmental, private sector, financial institution, research, and other. And if you want to share what other, of course, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself. I see we have strong representation of the governmental sector, but also private sector, research. Would have been great to also have a representative of financial institutions. We will try to promote our webinar more strongly towards this group next time. And let's move to the last question. What is your level of involvement in the implementation of the EU Cities mission? High, moderate, low, or none? We would like to see how closely you're working on projects around the mission. I see that we have a strong group of highly or moderately engaged, involved people, but we also have some new faces and new participants who perhaps would like to learn more about activities around the mission. Wonderful. I think we can then move to our presentations. So it is my pleasure to invite Wolfgang Teubner to speak about current challenges that cities are facing in financing accelerated transformation to climate neutrality. Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga, and good afternoon to everybody, and particularly also my distinguished fellow speakers who will definitely dig a lot more into the details of financing. I would like to raise a few points that I would say over the years we have identified, which are potentially of a structural nature and need potentially also structural responses. When we look at the mission, I mean, what we are actually looking into is to a dramatic acceleration, I would say, of a transformation, and particularly the transformation of infrastructure. And that means ultimately to, on the one hand side, spend a lot more money on it. And secondly, it means also to spend a lot more money much faster. This has a lot of particular challenges. So when we look at it, of course, we have to let aside discussions around planning and implementation capacities. I mean, that is, maybe a different discussion to be had. So, of course, when we look at the source of financing, I mean, ultimately, it's fairly simple. We look into public financing and we look into private financing. And ultimately, of course, we look towards an optimization also of the combination of both. When we look on the side of public financing, again, I mean, we basically look in principle on the collection of money on the public side and the distribution in a multi-level governance system. So this means basically from the European to the local level. And of course, national governments are in principle the key actors in that, because all the European funds are transferred from the national level first to the European budget and then, of course, back. So the first challenge, of course, that we identify here is that we are working in a European project context. So the mission is a European project and initiative which sets an ambitious goal and implies a very ambitious and challenging procedure for cities. However, there is no direct response in terms of investment financing from the European level. So, all the programs from the recovery funds to the repower, even the ERDF funds, has no particular investment financing component that can be directly accessed by local governments. Everything is then transferred back through the national or regional level. So also we have, of course, to acknowledge that in terms of the available funds, we have limitations. I mean, we cannot just, raise taxes, fees endlessly in order to generate a lot more money on the public side, looking at the state quota limitations that we ultimately face and the political challenges that all brings with that. So what, of course, we can potentially address is, of course, to make financing more efficient. So what we see as one of the key challenges is, of course, that the money that is available is often spent through too many fragmented, detailed programs, which bring also often a lot of administrative burdens on the one hand side to apply for these programs to the national level, and on the other hand side to basically administer the money and the reporting. So this brings a lot of burden to the cities that have limited capacities to do that. Secondly, the fragmentation comes, of course, through the wish of steering and implementing particular programs and activities from the national level through, a large number of ministries or units in ministries that have a particular task or goal, be it charging stations for electrical cars, being bike lanes, being greening facades, being solar energy or renewable energy in general. And there's so many programs available, but they're all, of course, very particular and often very administrative heavy. So this is, of course, the fragmentation is another problem. First of all, for local governments to get all the necessary information. Secondly, of course, to apply in the right moment for the right program and to make it basically compatible with their priorities and their strategies and their action programs. So I think we need to think to get to a more responsive financing mechanism that responds basically also to the integrated long-term strategies toward climate neutrality, the action plans and the investment plans of cities. So to be more flexible, to be more condensed, and to transfer bigger challenges for the decision making, ultimately on the expenditure on the local level, because otherwise I don't think we will be able to make the necessary progress in the necessary time. When we look on the private sector or the private financing, of course, we have basically two financing opportunities. One is debt, and the other one is equity investments. And then, of course, we have also a number of challenges coming with that. One is, of course, there is an expected return on investment on the private side. There is a high level of risk averseness on the private side. And of course, there is a lot of focus at the current structures on individual projects, which means, of course, it's often hard to reach the size and dimension of projects that is really interesting for large-scale private investment. So also there's the risk then that, of course, there is a bit of cherry picking happening on the private sector, because the interest is, of course, focusing on projects with low risk and good returns, which of course would also be attractive for the private sector. There is in equity investment, we have to, of course, take into consideration that this can bring issues around ownership and public control on particular services. And of course, there are and can be impacts on social equity by, of course, causing higher fees or costs for particular services in order to finance the necessary return on investment. So, so that's why we think, ultimately, we might need to look also at the same time, while we, of course, start working with what we find and to make the best out of the available investment tools and investment programs. We also have to think how we can potentially work on improved structures on the public side that on the one hand side make the available money more efficient in the sense of the available strategies and action plans, and on the other hand side to allow a better leverage of private financing. And this, I think, could potentially be achieved by forming investment facilities on the local level that are not basically looking into one project, but are multi-project investment facilities, which can, of course, lead to a better risk sharing between different projects with different risk levels, which can, of course, be a legal construction to overcome all the debt limits that are in the public budgets, but then basically have a facility that's working outside the public budget and can leverage different sources of private funding in also at different levels. And then, of course, this facility, individual projects will then be basically only financed through this facility, which then would, of course, allow to work on bigger dimensions. But that is only one of the possible visions. But I think that's all I want to say as a kickoff for the discussion. But I think my distinguished colleagues will provide a lot more insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. You're right on time. So thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for your interesting inputs and presenting kind of the umbrella of challenges that cities are facing when it comes to funding and financing climate neutrality projects. We will address, I think, some of these challenges in our presentations today. For example, the issue of fragmentation. And I'm very happy that Anna Karin will be able to shed light on some great work that's been done in Sweden. But in the meantime, I would love to invite our second speaker, Fedra van Huyse, from Viable Cities, to introduce us to the basics of climate investment planning at the city level.
Thank you very much, Olga, and hi everyone. Very nice to be here today and to talk to you about the basics of climate investment planning. I will share my screen with you now. I've prepared a short presentation. Let me first make it in a slideshow where I will talk to you about so what is a climate investment plan, what does it entail, and also what is the role of national and regional governments in supporting these cities with climate investment planning. I want to make 4 points in my presentation. So the first one is we've just come out of yet another summer with a lot of heat waves. lot of floods also in certain parts. And so we know now that waiting with investments and achieving climate neutrality will only make the situation worse. So the faster we achieve climate neutrality, the better it will be. It will be beneficial for people, for planet, but also economically, it can pay off. At the city level, climate neutrality goes beyond the municipal government. So in the current approach, we're not just looking at the municipal government and the assets owned by the municipality. We are also looking at all the other actors that are present in the city. We're talking citizens, industry, civil society, financial industry, basically everyone within the city, covering all the assets, public and privately held. And so climate neutrality can be achieved through a combination of certain activities, and they can be mostly labeled under behavioral change. So for example, switching from using your car to active or public transports, putting the heating less in your house, recycling. The second category entails improving energy efficiency and switching to renewable energy or increasing renewable energy. Examples here entail switching to an electrical vehicle, solar panels, wind energy, and so on. And the third category is the one of negative emission solutions, basically any action that takes out carbon emissions, such as green spaces, but also carbon capture and storage and carbon capture and utilization. There are barriers to finance. None of these are new. I would say they exist quite a long time already. And so we also quite know what these are. So there are actually quite a lot of things that we can do to overcome the barriers. And so regional, national, and supranational government levels, they can support climate action at the city level. And so, but what is required? Courageous leadership. The first one to move will also be the one that will benefit a lot from this. I will briefly go over the methodology for climate action and investment planning. So we've devised an approach that consists of 5 steps. But so, of course, the first step starts with 0. It's understanding what is my current emission level in my city. What assets do I have? What does my population look like? What is my main industry? And so on. What are the habits of my population? And what are the associated emissions? You can look at it both from a territorial perspective, so emissions within the geographic boundary, or a consumption-based emission perspective, where you look at the final point of consumption. So you incorporate imports and you take away export. Then you forecast your emissions to a year in the future. So for the EU mission, the year is 2030. So here you consider population growth or decline, an upgrade in technology, and so on. And then in the next step, here you can define your actions, combining behavioral change, technology improvements, and negative emission solutions. And there's all emission reductions with all these different solutions. But of course, these also come with a financial price tag for the different actors. So for example, what I talked about before, the electrical vehicles, here, it will be mostly private residents that buy them. They will also have to invest in charging infrastructure. But of course, the municipal government also has to purchase charging stations and so on. So in a third step here, you look at your consequences of your climate action plan. What risks are associated with these? For example, if we all start purchasing solar panels, is the market ready to deliver these solar panels for us? Citizen engagement challenges fit here too. We look at the economic case. So is it financially rewarding to invest? What does the business case say for my climate action plan? And in the third step here in the consequences, you actually look at policy and assess to what extent are these aligned with what I'm aiming to achieve. And then finally, the climate investment planning is the step that comes after all of this, where you basically very specifically make deals on what is the financial return that I'm willing to pay for, what are my terms and conditions, what impact am I aiming for, how will I monitor this, and so on. If we now look at the assessing the consequences step, where we talk about the economic case and so on, one of the things here to do is also understanding the financial capability of your different actors. So as I said before, we're looking not only at municipal government, but at everybody in the city. So I've listed here a little bit, what income do they have? So you can invest in assets upgrading in two ways. You can use your own money or you can use someone else's money. And so under your own money for the municipality, we're talking tax fees, grants, parking fees, for example, or fines. They can sell an asset and they can also get interest on savings. For citizens, people like you and me, normally it's our salary that we're mostly dependent on for our income. Inheritance, at times, subsidies that we get, interest on savings, and also selling assets. For our industry, again, it's through their sales figures. And then for the financial industry, it's mostly the return on their investment portfolios that they have as income. So we can make all these investments using our own money, but at times this is not the best choice because you could get a better deal when you use someone else's money. So in your financial instruments, you can use different types. So there's debt-based instruments like a loan and a bond. So here there's also labeled bond like green bonds and social bonds and sustainable bonds. So the labeled bonds, they have rules and regulations and they specify what you can spend the money on. So there needs to be thorough monitoring of the investment that you do, and you need to predefine what you will use the funding for. Then there's equity-based instruments where you sell shares in a company, for example, or you buy shares. So it's through stocks and funds. And crowdfunding is also one of these equity-based options. And then you have a third category, which is investment vehicles, which is normally a type of fund that can combine both equity-based and debt-based financial instruments. What is important here to understand is that some of the financial markets are very well regulated, others are not so regulated. So for example, for crowdfunding, that is a gray market instrument. So here the rules are not so clear or not so defined. And then very importantly, of course, as Wolfgang already said, the credit rating of your different actors, but also the technology readiness level. So how tested is this technology that actually identifies the risk return profile of your instrument. If I now go into a little bit of the challenges, I summarize them under three main categories. So the first one would be around the financial capability to make the investment. So if we said it depends on the credit rating of certain agents, if I would like to buy, or if anybody wants to buy a property, you go to the bank and the bank says, okay, what's your income? Okay, this is the loan I can give you. So very important credit rating. A second one is you need for some of these investments to make an upfront investment, but your cash flow comes later on. So for example, if you buy solar panels, normally the payback, I think, is between 7 and 10 years. So you need to know that you will get the return later on. And then also for a certain number of actors, there are rules and regulations around the lending cap or the level of indebtedness they can have, so they cannot borrow to infinity. Second challenge is around the size and the bankability of the investments. So around, I said it before, the technology readiness level, there's quite a few technologies that are not so tested. So the business case is also not so clear. Also, energy prices have fluctuated a lot, and in the formula we use costs. So it could be that it's quite uncertain. Your size of investment might also be very small. It could also be very large. So you need to make sure that you can find an investor ready to take on that deal. And so, like Wolfgang already pointed to, so combining different types of investments could be a solution to make them bankable. So for example, in Sweden, because a lot of the energy is already renewable, the case to insulate your house is not so high because you already heat your house with renewable energy. However, we cannot keep producing heat, so we will need to make a combination insulation and other measures. And then the third challenge here is around the power and agency to make the investment. So if you live in a rented property, for example, You might not be able to have the power to insulate your house or put a solar panel on the roof, etc., etc. For you to make the modal shift to public transport, there needs to be a bus or a train nearby. It needs to be manageable to get there, quick, etc., etc. So now, what were we thinking for the role of the regional, the national, and the supranational government levels? Of course, there's one way of supporting them by providing funding to make all the necessary changes and upgrading of the assets. But of course, using government as a system, there's actually multiple roles that regional, national, and international governments can play. So for example, related to collaboration, so there could be an assessment of how is policy aligned with the targets at the city level, and is there any need to change policy somewhere. You could also do a mapping of the financial flows just to see what is already funded at the city level. Are there any gaps? And is there anything where there's too much funding in an area? And so a third role for, I think, regional and national governments is to support innovation around technology upgrades, but also behavioral change and social innovation. How can we get that change necessary throughout society? Then in terms of providing financial funding, of course, subsidies and grants, guarantees for a high-risk technology could be useful. Belgium just issued a state bond, which was very positive or attracted a lot of attention. So this is also a possibility for other countries through procurement. I think I checked the numbers for Sweden the other day, and it was 80 billion euro bought per year in procurement. So I think that's a huge amount of potential to align. And then the final, there's two more. You could regulate, so push the disclosure and the standard setting, but then ultimately I also think, and this is not one that is used often, but there is a case to be made for prosecution in case of infringement of the laws. I think citizens are using it in a couple of countries, but government can also do it in case of when spatial planning is not being followed, for example. I will stop there, Olga, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Petra. It was very informative, and thank you for showing us the methodology kind of behind, the climate city contracts, the investment plans, how they're being built. And I'm making now a link to our next presentation by Cici Windisch from the Mission Board, who will also have a look at the city climate contract and investment plan process through the private finance lens and speak about this. So Cici, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Cici Windisch. I'm actually from the private sector. So I worked in energy trading for Stadtwerke, crowdfunded several climate projects also in cities, and worked in finance and tech. And now I'm in the city board, which is very cool. So I do not represent the EU. I do not represent any cities. So it's my perspective, my opinion. And also important, I will not share any confidential information about cities or anything else. So I need to... So as you know, the first batch has been submitted and evaluated. And one of the main insights is it takes a lot of time for the cities to prepare those climate contracts. And another observation is the investment plan is challenging, but it's also providing a new perspective, a perspective about whether or not the projects are bankable, with actual feedback from the EIB and the Bankers Without Boundaries. Since joining the board, there's one number stuck in my mind, 80%. 80% shall be financed privately. Citizen, industrials, banks of all those climate projects. That's a lot, and I don't think we have enough discussions about it. Diving into the CCC investment plans, it's actually more than risk returns. It's about getting projects ready for finance. And it's about managing those investments over time. Preparing the investment plan is a lot of work, and it's only scratching the surface. Getting it done will be a lot harder. What I kind of like about it, it's like in the private sector, having a contract and a template puts a frame around what you do, so you're not going off in every direction and changing the subject too much. At the same time, it gives you enough space to discover the actual challenges, find solution, and be agile enough to find city-specific solutions. And this is just, I'm just mentioning a few examples that I've seen or spoken to, and it's what we said before. The trade-off between, we have a lot of buildings to renovate. Do we do it building by building? If we do, it's a special purpose vehicle. Who owns the building? What contracts are in place? If it's an ESCO or a private party, creditworthiness matters. If it's a public party, debt ceiling matters. Those are, so once you dive deeper, you will actually solve and discover a lot of problems to solve. One party which is also very, very individual are the stakeholders, of course. If you have a Stadtwerke who has a credit line with a Kreissparkasse, this is a bespoke situation which you can transfer to others, not to everyone, but it's very important. And one thing I've seen, maybe it's my background, but you know, procurement and energy prices, those costs are pretty volatile at the moment. So take a buffer in your planning. It's just a little remark. So generally speaking, there's a lot of money out there in the private sector for climate projects and a lot of appetite for high impact investments. And there's a lot of need at a city level. But somehow they don't really match, which is something we discovered. So what can we do to connect the two better? And I'm not talking about new initiatives. I'm not talking about new financial instruments or new hubs. I'm talking about understanding each other better. You know, finance people are also human beings who speak a certain language and tick a certain way. And I just give some examples here. Respect people's time. When you work in a bank or a financial institute, you don't get paid to attend seminars or webinars. It's all a sunk investment for you. And you only get paid after a project is done and after it's fully financed. Everything before is your due diligence time. It's your project acquisition time. The longer it takes to get to the point, the more expensive it is to invest more time. This also translates into how you communicate information. Do your research. If you do ordinate loans, if you do green bonds, only present those. Start with the shortest possible. So do a one-pager, a term sheet with relevant information so they can say no fast and move on. If there's an interest, you go deeper and you ask for more. But what you don't want is send a lot of information and then on page 47, footnote 63, you discover why you can't do it. This means you just actually wasted people's time. So you're disrespecting people's time and you make it less enjoyable to work together. And this is very different from depending on your background. Another thing which is very common amongst, you know, everybody, you repeat what you know and you repeat what you like. So also at the city level, I mean, it takes so much. I'm personally overwhelmed with all those initiatives and all those instruments. It seems like there's so many who are doing similar things and with different names. And every time there's something new, you have to get to know it, you have to read it, you have to learn it. If you have things in place, maybe we should just dig a little bit deeper and see what's hindering us to get it done. And another thing which we already talked about is the cherry picking, which is very relevant. And I fully agree at it. And then we also have to think back, like I often hear like, yeah, well, the projects are not bankable, but whose job is it to get them bankable? You know, you can also, I mean, you can have some bargaining power here. You can say, listen, can't we use your lawyers to actually pull up some templates? You've done it before. Get in. And you can also use bargaining power. This is actually what makes me most excited about the mission and hopeful. If you go to, I'll give you an example. If you go with a small scale project, let's say a deep renovation, 5 million, you know, not the perfect due diligence. It's a tough due diligence depending on the type of projects. It's not a large scale. So you're like, okay, should I spend now a month getting this project ready or focus on a large scale one, which is easier? But what you can do is you say, yeah, I know it's small scale and difficult, but it's not just me. We have 40 similar projects piped up. So if you go deep now, if you do the extra work, if you help me with your team, you have a whole source of projects and a pipeline I can provide you with. This is the same for procurement. We're in a quite unique position here to, you know, get ourselves together, because I sometimes, you know, we talked about it before about the portfolio of projects, and I think it's a bit crazy what we ask the cities. You know, they're like, they have a 9-to-5 job, and then on a Friday they have 2-3 hours and they have to prepare a negotiation with a professional investor for multi-million projects. So you'd have 2 hours a week to dive into that. On the other side, you have a team of professional investors who've been doing it for 20 years with a lawyer fully dedicated on particular legal complications in the residential building market. You know, this is your negotiation power. It's super tough what we ask of the cities. And it's not only tough, but we actually, due to this imbalance of bargaining power, we expose cities to the cherry picking. So maybe, but this is my opinion, maybe give them the funds for experts, you know, spend the extra 10, 20K to really, and pool the resources, because it saves you millions afterwards. I always say it's good to think it through in the negotiation part, because it saves you so much time, efforts, and money later on. And, you know, templates don't serve it. We don't need another overview of every hypothetical investment product. We don't. Let's focus. This city knows how to do a credit loan from a particular entity, and they need exactly that. Then get in and let them get to the last mile. Let them hire the lawyer, the accountant, the specialist who's been working there for 15, 20 years, so that they're actually in a good position. I think that makes me passionate about it. And another thing but this is again my opinion, maybe a strong opinion, but I believe that we should subsidize financial partners. So, you know, if you look at KfW, EIB, and other partners, to do the hard stuff, not the easy stuff. If you take a street lighting project, large scale, it's so bankable, the due diligence is so straightforward, you can go to the private market for that. We want to get the hard stuff done with a high capex per CO2 saved. We want to do the social housing part with also a social impact. All the hard stuff other people don't do because of market failure. This is where we should subsidize the people for. So yeah, but again, it's my opinion. And last but not least, so Net Zero Cities, they're the experts. So if you want to know anything, please contact them. If you have any questions, any ideas, there's my LinkedIn profile. You can always send me a message, and also a private message on what, you know, I'm very, very, very happy to listening to cities, what works, what doesn't, and just say it's confidential and I won't say anything about it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sissy, for your presentation, for this fantastic insight into the private financing world that I think, many of us might be still myself find challenging, and yeah, it's difficult to build some links and bridges between different types of actors and stakeholders. So thank you a lot for that. Let's move on now to our two case studies. So we have the first case study from Finland. It's a program called the Decarbonized Cities. And I would like to invite Sini Uttu from Business Finland to briefly speak about this very interesting project. And just a reminder to our participants that you can post your questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to collect them and respond to them afterwards.
Thank you. I will thank you for the possibility to speak at this webinar. I'm now sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Not yet in a full mode, but yeah.
Yeah, I will. Now you can see it in the full mode.
Yes.
Okay,
perfect.
thank you. So my name is Sini Uttu, and I'm working for Business Finland within themes like low carbon built environment and energy, and in projects, consortium projects related to these two themes. So I will present the case study Decarbonized Cities program, but first I will explain to you how Business Finland was formed and under which government organization under which government organization it is. So here you can see different ministries, and under the Ministry of Economic Affairs we have Business Finland and also other organizations. And some 5 years ago, Business Finland was formed by merging together two organizations. Organization called CapaCITIES, which was a innovation funding agency, and FinPro, which was a export promotion organization. And now we are working together, and we are one organization called Business Finland. We still have two organizations, company side and then agency side, because for the funding we need to act as an agency. Then there are other organizations, as you can see here, under other ministries, and together we are all part of an umbrella organization called Team Finland, and we work very closely together. What Business Finland does, so as I mentioned, we of course fund different kind of projects for companies, research organizations. They can be very small projects, just innovation vouchers, but they can be several million euro loans or grants for companies and research organizations, and also consortium projects. Then we, of course, support internationalization and export. So we have export services for companies and support their activities, internationalization activities, and so on. And also we have invest in services. We want to create a competitive business environment in Finland and attract investments to Finland. And also our tourism promotion, the industry benefits from a positive country image. So these services and actions are also under Business Finland. And we are different offices around Finland, but also we are located all over the world, as you can see. So in 40 different locations we have our global network, and we are so to say on the site. We can help our customers with different issues and contacts and so on. So this was about Business Finland. So now to the Decarbonized Cities program. So this program was launched last spring, and all of our programs are outcomes of different missions that we have. And this program is one of the outcomes of our Zero Carbon Future mission. So this is like an action to get forward with the Zero Carbon mission, or one of the actions that we have. It's quite a long program, but we want really to receive some impact. So the vision is that by 2030 there will be 10 cities globally that have significantly reduced the CO2 emissions with the help of Finnish expertise. So Finnish company solutions, Finnish research, and so on. And we in Finland, we already have these 100 mission cities. So in Finland we have 6 cities that are selected to these mission cities, and all of them have a target to be carbon neutral 2030. But actually one city, the city of Lahti, which is situated 100 kilometers north from our capital Helsinki, so they are committed to be carbon neutral already 2025. So this is very soon, but this also shows that we are forerunners. We have very ambitious goals, and our cities are like the first to reach these carbon neutrality targets. But of course, because the main aim of Business Finland is to create prosperity to Finland, so through this program, we want, of course, one of the main impacts is that we want to create new export business to Finnish companies. And here is a target that we will create 3 billion euros new export. So that's a very important target in all our actions in Business Finland, not only in these programs. So here you can see the main focus, the main area, the main 3 themes that this program focuses on, and we want to look at them as a whole. We want to have a holistic approach. So energy, built environment, and urban mobility, and the focus is there on the middle, touching all these 3 areas. And cities play an important role because the challenges exist in the cities. They account for most of the greenhouse gas emissions. Most of the energy is consumed there. So all these challenges can be solved on city level, and we see that especially within digitalization, the Finnish companies have solutions and can solve the city's carbon neutrality challenges with the help of digitalization. And for example, we have solutions related to communication, connectivity, IoT, smart EV charging, virtual power plants, flexibility, smart heating and cooling, energy communities. Then we have a safe grid and also active grid management. Regarding funding instruments for cities, so we basically have only one funding instrument that is particularly for the cities. It is for the procurement, the public procurement unit in the city. And here you can see we have tried to through this picture to explain what we can fund within an innovative public procurement, that a challenge that city has. So we can fund the preparation of this innovative public procurement, but we can with 40 or 50% grant. So the negotiations with the different companies developing their solutions for the challenges that the cities have. But we can also go so far that we can fund with the same percentage the first pilot of a limited area. For example, if a city wants to invest in a new EV charging system, we cannot, of course, fund the whole investment, but if it wants to test it in a limited area, so we can be there and share the risk. Will it function? Is it what they are looking for? So we can also fund this first pilot on a limited area. This is my last slide, and I just want to explain with 2 different projects what we, for example, can do and what we have done. So the first example is the city of Vaasa. So it's a city on the west coast, quite north. They have some 70,000 inhabitants. So they have a project for 50. They want to construct 50 kilometers of a network of cycling and walking path using biochar. So this is like an innovative public procurement project, and parallel to this, they have another project where they conduct then more in-depth research on how biochar acts as a carbon capture in different street area structural solutions. So this is something that we have been financing, this innovative public procurement through our program. Then this other project, this is a consortium project where the city has not been financed, but the city is like an enabler. So there's a lot of data created in the city related to real estate, for example. But this data is not analyzed, it's not developed, it's not used. And this one creates carbon neutral cities with reliable data. It has develops a project, a concept of data market places, and the key here is edge computing. And in this marketplace, then you can sell or buy or exchange this real estate data, and then promote carbon neutrality. And this has it's a consortium project that has received together these different. There are different companies and research organization, and they have received some 2 million, and the total budget is some 4 million. And this is also kind of a sub-project of a challenge company project. We have for 2-3 years now financed in Business Finland some over 15 large companies within their challenges, and they are like very ambitious challenges. They commit 3 to 5 years to solve these challenges, and Nokia is one of the companies that have received. They receive either 10 or 20 million for this 3 to 5 years, and they have received 20 million with their challenge project Competitive Edge, and this is now part of this Nokia's sub-project in this Nokia's challenge project. So this was my presentation. Hope you got some kind of idea about what we are doing in this program and concrete examples. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siini. We are now moving to our final presentation, and we will be kind of switching once again to the public side of funding with a case study from Sweden and Anna-Karin Stolz from Swedish Energy Agency. Anna-Karin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to share my slides, just find them here. Let's see. Do you all see them now?
Yes, perfect.
So there we go. So I just stopped reflecting on this question, which was in the invitation as well. What can the national level do to better support local governments in financing climate neutrality? So I will present an ongoing innovation process, a test that we have done, a test to develop local portfolios of projects that we have financed. And now I'm talking about these 6 national agencies signing the Swedish city climate contract. And I'm representing these national organizations now. So I'm not just representing the Swedish Energy Agency. So let's move on. Where is the next slide? There. So my presentation today, I'm just going to talk a little bit who is doing this, who are we, why are we doing it, and what is it about, this project portfolio, what are the benefits for the cities, and some ideas for further innovation. And in the end, I'll end just with some other work in progress. So who is doing this? Who are we? We, yes, it's always interesting to know when we're talking in we are doing this and you're approaching things. We are actually this team that you see in the picture there. This is the innovation team that we formed when we signed this climate city contract, the Swedish climate city contract. Not to this, I think we were in the forefront when we developed also the EU city climate contract, the CCC, that I think Cissi talked about. We are trying to get all these two together, but now we have our Swedish one where 23 cities, 23 local governments have signed, and we are 6 national governments in Sweden. You see them here: the Swedish Energy Agency, Formas, which is a Council for Sustainable Development, Vinnova, the Sweden Innovation Agency, and Swedish Transport Administration, the Swedish Agency for Economic and Regional Growth, and then the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Very difficult to say Swedish all the time here, but 6 of them are then formed the innovation team. And of course, we also work a lot with other national agencies, and I start writing out some pictures how we work together, but that was too complicated, so I just ended up with these. But we have also, just to say that we are working within 13 other national agencies in a governmental assignment that is called the Council for Sustainable Cities in Sweden, together with also the Association for Local and Regional level. But we don't really have that much, we don't really know how to do things. So that's why it was so great that Viable Cities, our strategic innovation program, launched, and we now trying to figure out how could we work better together. So in this contract, we have the national agencies have their own commitments. It's 4 of them. We're trying to work smarter together with these cities when policy making. And we are also all funding and support in different programs. And we also commit ourselves to better coordinate our financing, and we also participate in European funding and partnership activities to work better together. I will focus on this one today, what we're doing under this commitment. So let's go on. Why did we do that? And why do we need to better support local governments in financing? We all know this. I think we've been talking about this one-stop shop thing, and we know that we need to coordinate ourselves better. But how we listened clearly, is it more funding? What kind of funding? Other hindrances or barriers? So we needed really to ask and listen better. And we already in 2021, actually, as one thing that we did within this government assignment, the Council for Sustainable Cities, we asked a lot of cities, municipalities. And one thing that we got back is you can summarize in this one: coordinate yourself better. There's a lack of overview or kind of fundings that Wolfgang already referred to. It's difficult to prioritize. They don't see the aggregated information. It's also uncertain outcome in relation to all the time spending to search for or apply. Also too much focus on innovation and new ideas. How can we use everything and the knowledge that we already have? And also a lot of problems and difficulties when it comes to applications, the lack of foresight and short application times. But I will not focus on that. We were looking more into how can we understand more. So we needed to do something, to start out with something. So we started out with this thing. And I'm going to say this is an innovation process of developing local portfolios of funding. So now, how does it look when you go to the local side? How much funding have they got? So we started out to look historically. Back in the last 5 years, we collected data first from our 6 national agencies. How much have we been funded over the last 5 years from 2016 and 2021? We started out with 5 municipalities just for a test, and it was Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, Uppsala, and Umeå. And we collected data from all of our systems and put them together. When we got out here, you can see this is how it looked like. We also categorized the collected data into main themes, which you can see here on the visualized first circle. Huvudtema is main theme, and also horizontal dimension. And then also we categorized all the data in, is it mostly research, or is it demo and testing, or implementation, commercialization, or investment. So, and this is just a test, and there is a lot of things that we have to do better. But this is also what this is the overall picture, and you can see how many projects we've been funding, how much in Swedish crowns, and then also this categorization. And then all the municipalities, they get their own portfolio visualized like this, so they can have a look. Is it true? How much in transport and mobility? How much in sustainable business development? And here you have more energy and so on. And if it's more, mostly it's in research and test and demo, not so much in implementation and so on when you look into the development phase. But they also got the list, the Excel file with all the short description of the project and what kind of program, and also on who was the main beneficiary and the indirect beneficiary and so on. So what is that something that you need? Then we had dialogue with all these separate dialogues to talk to them and present this idea and reflect on if there's something that is good for them. So what are the benefits for cities? What did they say when we had this Teams dialogue and talked with them? And for them, this is just some quotes. And what we can see is was really great for us to have this overview. It's so difficult for us to keep track of the project. And of course, this is only a small part. It's a public, the small part that you can apply for at one of these 6 national agencies. It's not all of our programs. We had difficulties to also get data from all of it, but it's a start. But just this start was really great. Just this so difficult, even on the local level, to keep track, actually, to aggregate the funding that they have themselves applied for. And you can understand from all the different parts of local government that it's not so easy. And as we all know, there's also a lack of resource, lack of time to coordinate and to get this overview. We all recognize these difficulties to have overview and getting a more holistic picture. So now they say you can summarize that this is a good start to get a better decision-making document, so that they can discuss more where should we plan to apply for money, where in what area, where do we really need now, where are our holes that it says something about. We can see our holes in the climate investment plan, where we need more financing, and also how to find where we can use this public funding as a leverage instrument together with other, as a portfolio a lot of us talked to before. And also of course, we learned a lot. Our national funding agency, we also get a better understanding of the local perspective. When we learn also together, we get new ideas together how to develop this method. We get an overview of the funding systems and the possibility to cooperate better with other agencies. And actually, it's not really hard to put all our funding and support scheme together in a portfolio and categorize them according to the phase of a development. However, nobody did this before. We didn't get that task from the government. We only get the task to evaluate one research program at a time. That's very important we get that with every governmental assignment we got, we always have to, of course, analyze and make consequence risk analysis and evaluate. But you don't get we don't have time, and we don't get the assignment to work more holistic. So this was just to see what we can learn from this. So some ideas that we collected from our colleagues in the local governments and our national agency colleagues is that what we first of all find out that we have to start working with each other's agencies' IT support functions to further develop the work, because it's really difficult to get the system to talk. Just to collect data was one first problem. The data was in different forms, and it's not really easy to put it together to get this on the local level. We have data on the aggregate national levels, but not when it comes to geographical local levels. That's much more is really difficult. Depends on what kind of national agency. Some of us have better data than others. So we will develop that work, and also in 2024 we will offer the possibility to get this local project portfolio to all our 23 cities that are in the Viable Cities program. However, we cannot categorize it in the same way because we don't have, this was a manual exercise that we did, so we have to skip that part for now, but it will anyway be very interesting for the local governments to get this Excel file and also make some analysis. We also want to offer an interactive web interface to the municipalities, so we can put our collected data there, and they get their own. Maybe we will talk about this, Fedra, if we're going to do it with your dashboard together, or if it will be on another space. But that was also some ideas that we got when we talked with the cities, that if you have them collected there, we can put in our own collected data. For example, if the city's own financed project, and also as they are working very hard with their climate investment plan, they also know that there are some of the industries or some of the actors in their geographical area that are very important. Maybe have they also got public funding from us, for example, the energy agency. They could also develop another part of that data, so they can get a bigger picture and more how do you say, actually build their own portfolio, which will be more realistic, will be better. So, and also we will continue working on this method, of course, and next step is to maybe work with one or two other cities to make a deeper data collection. Maybe the one that I just talked about, we can help them with finding out more about what have we financed on the local level that could be a part of your plan, a better decision-making plan for next step. So this was what I was going to say for now. Just a very quick view at what else are we doing. We're also working in at this first commitment with smarter policy development. We are now trying to launch policy labs together with the cities to work with these 4 themes, which are very challenging for the cities. See here, mobility beyond the car as a norm. And so, and also, what is this climate city contract? Is it a new kind of governance process, like the one that I'm just looking into? When we work much more holistic and put things together, how can we deepen our understanding of how this could shape a new kind of governance, a new kind of working methods, and how can we continue to do that. So that was for me. Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing now there. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna-Karin, for this presentation. I think it really, shows a lot of effort that you've put into this initiative, and how amazing things can actually happen when you're working, with different levels of government, at different levels of administration. So congratulations for all this work, and thank you for sharing it. I hope that it will be inspiring for a lot of national level partners who are in the room. And now we have a couple of minutes for discussion, for your questions. So please feel free to raise your hand, unmute your microphones if you have any questions to our speakers. This is your chance to address them directly. I see there is a question from Julia. Julia, would you like to? Thanks.
Thanks, Olga. Yeah, I'm Julia Rawlins from Italy, and thank you to all the speakers for the really interesting presentations. I was also very struck by the 80% figure, Sissy Vindish, that you mentioned, and interested in the potential for partnerships between cities and financing institutions. And I'm curious what kind of fora you think are needed to bring these two sectors together. I mean, are there potentially existing events and platforms, or do you think we actually need to create new spaces where people can really come together and talk so that they can overcome the barriers and understand each other better? Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. It's a question I'm thinking about a lot at the moment. I think we're trying step by step to do it now. There's also the one where you're involved with the first event in Frankfurt coming up soon. I think you have to time it certainly. So you start with sustainable banks, with KfW, EIB, Bankers Without Boundaries, and then later on commercial banks or other investors. It's a good question, but I think it's also networking. It's step by step. I'd keep it small and focused and short, and then move on next, and maybe always start with examples. That's my preferred approach. Start with examples. Do
Great.
small things, learn, improve, go next. And this is maybe also a generic message I can give. It's just do, cities are the best. It's the same that I have from the startup advice. The best advice I got is like, Americans are not better, they just fail faster. And I think we're actually better at cities, we're better at climate. We just have to try out, small, fail, learn, do better next time. And maybe we start with small projects. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm still thinking about it, actually.
Well, thanks. I think sharing success stories is very motivating and inspiring. So thanks a lot.
Petra, feel free to come in.
Yes, thanks for this good question, Julia. And I know you addressed it to Sissy, but maybe I can give an add-on for Sweden. So we actually looked at the responsible investing strategy of the 10 largest private investors in Scandinavia, looking how ready are they to approach cities. So do they make any reference to cities, in what way, etc. And they all see it still as very traditional, as someone to lobby with, or they do small investments in bonds, but so nothing larger. And so we've now set up a first private investor dialogue where we will use Chatham House rules with the municipally owned bank Kommuninvest, but with a couple of private investors, just to tease out, so under which conditions would you want to work with the cities, because I think they will all be pushed by the disclosure regulations also to align better. And so one of the things that is not yet in place, but it could be a brown taxonomy that is coming could come at the EU level as well, to push industry and investors to better align with more sustainable practices. So that is also one of the things that we're thinking of. But I'd be interested to hear if this is also on the agenda in other countries, because it would be nice to exchange with others as well on what works best.
Thanks, Petra. Please feel free to raise your hand if you want to approach our speakers directly. Otherwise, I see there are some questions in the chat. I think they've been partially answered by Wolfgang and Sissy. I don't know if Wolfgang is still around, but maybe one of you would like to just briefly summarize the discussion and examples that you referred to, for the benefit of the wider group. I don't know if Wolfgang, you would like to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can potentially quickly go back. I mean, I think one of the key questions, I mean, there were two questions. One was about the general issue that, of course, not all projects are yielding an immediate return on investment, because there is, I mean, you have the typical split incentive situation. I mean, it's most obvious, of course, often in adaptation, because in principle you're avoiding a risk that is leading to reducing of costs of particular actors in the long term, which are basically profiting from it. But you cannot generate a return from those particular I would say profiteers. Or you have the same when you improve air quality, you improve public health through urban greening, which also helps cooling, but the health insurance that is basically most likely saving quite a bit of cost is not necessarily creating they have a return, but the city that is most likely doing these improvements is not necessarily tapping into these returns. So I think, but there is potentially, and I think if you localize it, I mean, at least an idea of sharing investment, because also of course insurances have investments, because I mean they have a lot of money, but of course for them, again, risk is not positive. They cannot take any risk. So I mean, I think, and that is how I would say, a facility that is well capitalized by public funds, they can, of course, do a lot on risk mitigation. And this is, I think, the whole idea. There was the question: is there any such facility? I mean, a lot of course, cities are using investment or management facilities for larger developments, for particular large-scale projects. They have all these PPP, SPVs, but they're not using it in a wider, context of managing multiple projects. But I think it's a bit of a, it's an extension, and I think it's a point of negotiation, because also you have to find a readiness on the public side, to not, as I said, I mean, the problem of fragmentation in these, in the multi-level government sphere is that, of course, if the Ministry of Transport says, our priority is, we are now pushing electric cars, so you can get, of course, subsidies for electric cars, you can get subsidies for charging stations, you get, and another unit has a certain program on bike lanes, and, whatever program is currently available, often, I would say, is, the cities are not often then following their strategic priorities, but they get becoming opportunistic. I mean, because there's money for this, then we do this, because we can get, the fiscal transfers to support the bike lanes, even if we have potentially another strategy or strategic priority, or it's going against the integration. I mean, if you just think at the moment, I mean, I'm referring now a bit to Germany, but we have this big, heating plan and heating strategy thing, and I mean, there are cities who will, extend their heating grids, their district heating grids massively, so they dig up a lot of streets. And in each case, you can bring a lot of things from nature-based solutions, changing the transport, everything, but there is no integrated funding. I mean, the heating is, the heating grid will be supported from national government through another program, then the bike lane and whatever, the trees will be supported, the greening will be supported by another program. So this is what I mean by the administrative burden. If a city would just have, whatever, 50, 70 million in an investment facility through which they can then also leverage different ways of, public funding, depending on the smaller scale projects that are then actually happening on the ground. Or they can, a facility can issue potentially, green bonds, because which a city can potentially not do through their debt limits and all these kind of, to make it actionable. I think that is the idea behind it. And as I said, in a smaller scale and a more particular scale, these things are happening, but not necessarily at the scale that we would potentially look into in a process like now the mission and the implementing of a net zero investment plan. And I think that is currently, why I say also a second strategic ambition next to working with what we find currently, because we cannot wait till we, potentially can build a few of these examples or even get to this point in this multi-level governance space, because it needs also the agreement or the change or stepping out of the current procedures in the normal governance processes. And but I think ultimately I strongly believe, after many years of experience, that we will not manage the dimension of investment that is needed to get in line with the goals of the mission. Or even if we take a larger scale of cities and say, well, let's look into 2035 instead of 2030, we will not get there if we are not also trying new structural approaches in the public financing side, also with the view of leveraging private financing into this on a larger scale, because that's where, of course, a lot more money is available. Because in the public side, as I said, there is you cannot in principle endlessly raise or expand budgets. So either you have to reshift your priorities, or you will have, of course, you have to have efficiency gains, how you spend the money, make it less heavy, make it faster, but that is it. But also then you need also private financing, and you need to do it in a good way to not jeopardize, of course, public governance and social equity, but on the other hand side, of course, to also make it feasible for the private investment side. So that is roughly how I would currently be able to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. As we are approaching the end of our webinar, maybe we can squeeze in the last question from Lena Holmberg that was posted in the chat. Lena is asking, I see, Lena, you perhaps you want to ask the question yourself. I see you're on the screen.
Absolutely. I'm just curious if anyone knows if there is an ongoing work regarding some kind of standard for open data, shared data regarding funding, because I was encouraged by the example provided by Anna-Karin from Sweden. And I mean, of course, Sweden is just one instant, but it would be nice to see these kinds of flows of funding to the cities and the actors in the cities. So I was just wondering if anybody knows about such a standardization project or would like to see it happen. So anyone?
Lena, I can ask. I don't know about the standard, but I know we have a directive of open data sharing that we all, I mean, we have to, and I think I'm just talking about what I know, but I suppose that our ongoing work on the national level on this matter. What we have in this, we got from the government an assignment to work on sharing data, financial data, but it's now very small. And when working on this test, we got to know about it, that it was another working group among other, mostly, I would say, research funding agencies that have this assignment that they're gonna try to, I mean, get to it was much more into that what is it that we necessarily need to ask for when actors apply for money. What are the least common, what do you say, minsta gemensamma nämnare in Swedish, the least, the very minimum that you have to ask for. So the intention was to not burden the people that are applying with too much information. So, but that is a good start, because now we have this working group in Sweden, at least with other national funding agencies that are working on this standard in a way that we are cooperating with now, because we found out that they are doing this work, but that they don't do this categorization that we wanted to. But now maybe we can find another way. So it's interesting, but it's not that easy, because there is it's also about the data systems that all the agencies have. We all have invested in many different ones. So we have a work to do, but I think there is a clue there when we can start finding out that working with digitalization together with societal changes better, not focusing on digitalization, but using it as a tool much better to see these overall pictures that we were doing now with just this very simple start. So it was not a correct answer, Lena. I need to find out if there is a standard coming along, but it's a start at least in Sweden.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna-Karin. We have unfortunately approached the end of our meeting today. So thank you very much for all your presentations, and thank you for the brief yet very interesting discussion. I hope that we can take some of these points offline and kind of continue our work and our conversation around different points. So of course, I encourage you to follow the work that we are doing in both CapaCITIES and Net Zero Cities. And for any specific requests, I'm also sharing my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions, if you would like to connect with any of the speakers, I'm very happy to facilitate this. And a very last communication from my side: if you want to meet CapaCITIES in person, we have an upcoming event that will be on European Week of Regions and Cities, and CapaCITIES partners from 4 countries, from Hungary, Portugal, Romania, and Slovakia will be presenting there about their challenges and opportunities in building national platforms and national support structures for the mission cities. So if you're in Brussels on 10th of October, we are going to organize a morning session from 9:30 to 11 there, and I will only ask Oana, my technical support, to put a link in the chat to this event. So if anybody wants, we encourage you to register and to join us there. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very nice afternoon. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.